Would you turn in your Bibles to James chapter 1 for a moment this morning? James chapter 1. Right after the book of Hebrews, right before the book of 1 Peter. James chapter 1. I want to read verses 22 down to into chapter 2, verse 14. James 1:22 to 2:14. But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he's like a man observing his natural face in a mirror. For he observes himself, goes away, and immediately forgets what kind of man he was. But he who looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues in it, and is not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the word, this one will be blessed in what he does. If anyone among you thinks he's religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his own heart, this one's religion is useless. Pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their trouble, and to keep oneself unspotted from the world. My brethren, don't hold the faith of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory, with partiality. For if there should come into your assembly a man with gold rings and fine apparel, and there should also come in a poor man in filthy clothes, and you pay attention to the one wearing the fine clothes, and say to him, sit here in a good place, and say to the poor man, you stand over there, or sit here at my footstool. Have you not shown partiality among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? Listen, my beloved brethren, has God not chosen the poor of this world to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom, which he promised to those who love him? But you've dishonored the poor man. Do not the rich oppress you and drag you in the courts? Do they not blaspheme that noble name by which you are called? If you really fulfill the royal law according to the scripture, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, you do well. But if you show partiality, you commit sin and are convicted by the law as transgressors. For whoever shall keep the whole law yet stumble on one point, he's guilty of all. For he who said don't commit adultery also said do not murder. Now if you do not commit adultery, but you do murder, you have become a transgressor of the law. So speak and so do as those who will be judged by the law of liberty. For judgment is without mercy to the one who has shown no mercy. Mercy triumphs over judgment. What does it profit, my brethren, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can faith save him? You know, we live in a very broken world. We see it on so many levels. And when I say that, your mind might go to maybe one of the wars that makes the headlines every day. Or maybe the leading crime story on the local news or the newspaper. But unfortunately, one of the most devastating examples of our society's deterioration is all around us, and we often turn our heads away from it. It's often ignored. And it's the deterioration of the home and of the family. Homes are very broken around us. Parents, sadly, are failing miserably as parents. The lifestyles and behaviors that our world lives and justifies are a long way from the pattern God designed. And the consequences of that, and the consequences of the addictions that consume so many people, are devastating. The big headlines that make the news are often a result of the failures that are happening at the most basic level in homes. And that's where the church should be very different. That's where we should be shining the bright light of Jesus, the bright light of his truth, the bright light of his love into this dark world. Not only should the homes of those who proclaim Jesus be very different, and the people in them living very different lives, but they also should be beacons of hope and healing to the dark world around us. And I've read James 1 and 2 to remind you of that. And because the month of May is Foster Care Awareness Month. And I wanted to take a minute to talk about that. And this church has been very active in foster care. Some of you here have been foster parents yourselves, giving hope and help to hurting kids from hard places. And you've seen firsthand the impact that the trauma of neglect, abuse, and abandonment has had on children. And bless you for your part in that. As most of you know, Christy and I have felt called by God to serve as foster parents for the last 5.5 years. And we've had the blessing of caring for 12 children in that time. And you've done that with us. So many of you were our support group during that time. Whether becoming involved in a hands-on way and supporting in a variety of ways, or through your prayers for us. And I want to take a moment to say a big thank you to all of you for that. The work of foster care truly requires a big support group, a safety net. It's hard when the kids come. They come with a lot of baggage, a lot of wounds. They express themselves in behavioral issues. They express themselves in maybe the ability to receive love. They express themselves in even health problems at times and learning disabilities. And so it's hard when they first come, but it's also really hard when they leave. And foster care is a beautiful work of faith because we invest in a life in a way that we know it makes a difference, but we don't always get to see the fruit of that. We may never get to know the full impact, at least on this side of eternity, that it makes. Someday we may take in more children as a family. Right now we're still kind of licking our wounds from the loss of who we've had. But you know, those who do foster care or any other ministry like that, we trust in the truth of 1 Corinthians 15:51. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. And so because this is Foster Care Awareness Month, I wanted to highlight that. I wanted to talk about that, but really I have 3 goals for today. And I've 3 goals for today, not only to talk about foster care awareness, and some of the information I'll be sharing is off this website, but also to raise your awareness, kind of to have a little educational time about the impact of neglect that's happening all around us. And I'll talk more about that. But as I said, the first goal is to promote foster care in the church, not just First Baptist Church of Elimsport, but in the church as a whole. God's people should be leading in the way in this sort of ministry, shining God's light and showing God's love to the least of these, to the people who need it so much. Like we just read in James chapter 1 and 2. We need to be doers of the word, not just hearers only. We need to love our neighbors as ourselves. And this is one of the many ways that we do that. This world needs more foster, and with that, more adoptive parents. Did you know that right now there's over 390,000 children in foster care just in the United States? 20,000 youth are emancipated from foster care without a permanent family every year. They leave the foster care system, they age out of it, and they have no family to call their own. 20,000 every year. Furthermore, those who are foster parents, they need supporters. They need friends and family to join in, lending a hand and giving the children care. You know, I wish, I say a big thank you because you as a church have helped us so much in that. And I feel bad. I wish I could go back in time, realizing how much that some of the other people in this church that have done foster care needed help, and wish I'd been more active in helping to encourage and organize help behind them, because it is an exhausting and difficult job. But you know, foster kids also need support beyond what they might get just in a foster home. all of us, as we go about our daily tasks, we need to be aware and alert for the hurting kids around us. And even those kids who are in the system supposedly getting care, they need other people loving them, patient with them, caring for them. The children and youth services, or whatever they're called in all the different states and counties throughout the country, they do they do a better job at screening than used to be done decades ago, realizing that not everybody who says, I want to care for a child, has good intentions. But even today, nobody knows what's always happening in a foster home, except maybe some of the people like teachers and daycare providers and people at a local church ministering to their children on a regular basis. They're the ones who get to see kids that have needs that maybe other people aren't noticing. And we need to be aware of that. I want to read a story off that website that I had up a minute ago, the Child Welfare Information Gateway website. I want to read this is the story of Leslie they just posted this year. This is Leslie's story. I am an adoptee, but I was a foster kid first. Last October, I celebrated my 50th birthday. Even though my childhood happened a long, long time ago in a land far, far away, I still carry it with me like a dark storm cloud in my bones, my memory, and my DNA. Sometimes when I think about everything I went through, I can't believe I survived. Part of the problem was that nobody ever asked how I felt or what I needed. When I was 10, my brother and I were removed from our mother's custody for the final time. Separated from my brother, I began a new life as a foster kid and felt the grief and loneliness that unavoidably comes with the loss of family and familiarity. Being in foster care was not better than being with my mom. It was much worse because I still suffered from abuse, and now I also suffered from extreme emotional despair. Life became an exhausting existence of chores, rationed food, and a system of rules that only applied to the foster children in the home. I envied and despised the biological daughter because she received special treatment, softness, care, and love. Even though I begged my grandparents to take me in, they could not comprehend the gravity of my intense fear and alienation. I drowned daily in a system that purportedly had no concerns other than my well-being. Thankfully, my teacher was working overtime without my knowledge to help me. I should have never been left alone in these homes, put at risk and worn down until I felt I didn't matter at all. No child should be. Without realizing it, I fell into denial. I walked around half empty with a forced smile on my face so everyone would be happy with me. I cried myself to sleep. I gave up hope, and I barely coped. Even though my teacher rescued me, I was still at risk. Her consistent support and unconditional love over many years allowed me to shed some of my loneliness. I would not be here today if she hadn't stepped in. But what about the hundreds of thousands of foster kids who don't have a teacher willing to risk everything to help them? What do those kids get? How will they survive? By shedding light on what I needed as a foster kid, I hope to help other foster kids get what they need. How can we give kids a greater chance at happiness in surviving foster care? Now, that article would go on to list some things that people can do, but let me sum it up by saying God puts us in a place in this world, and he surrounds us by different people. We bump into people along the way. We need to be alert to what is God wanting me to do in the place he's already put me in this world, and be aware of kids that are hurting, and being willing to get involved and to help. And certainly in our paths, it's not only kids that God often places there, but adults too, where we sense there's something that's not right. Do we care enough to get involved and to help? So I encourage you to be on the lookout for children like Leslie when she was young. Be aware there are kids out there needing one caring adult to intervene in their life and to speak out for them. It says in Psalm 82, 3 and 4, defend the poor and fatherless. Do justice to the afflicted and needy. Deliver the poor and needy. Free them from the hand of the wicked. Proverbs 31, 8 and 9 says, open your mouth for the speechless and the cause of all who are appointed to die. Open your mouth, judge righteously, and plead the cause of the poor and needy. We often read these verses when talking about abortion, but they address the plight of all those that are oppressed, abused, and neglected. Well, so I have 3 goals for today. That's one of the big ones. To encourage you to either maybe get involved in foster care, to help provide help to those who that might be giving foster care, and to be alert to what's going in the lives of the children and the people around you. Because there's a lot of awful things going on behind closed doors, and kids have no one to go to sometimes. We want to be that caring adult that gets involved. But I want to address the second issue. It connects both this first one and the last one I'll talk about. I want to build the awareness regarding the insidious abuse of neglect. I debated not showing this video. I thought of cutting it in half, but I'm going to show the whole thing. It's 5 or 6 minutes long, because I want you to realize that neglect is as bad or worse than any other abuse out there. And what we don't realize is because of addictions, all kinds of addictions, there are a lot of neglected kids. And the impact it has, starting with babies, is just incredible. So would you watch this video? You want me to hit ahead on mine, or you got it?
Everyone in a community has a vested interest in everyone else's children, because everyone else's children determine the next adult population that makes for a successful society. Built into our biology is the need to have responsive interactions with adults.
Neglect for children is when they don't get what the brain is expecting to get, what the child is expecting to get, what we are biologically prepared and waiting for, which is input from those around us.
It's this back and forth serve and return interaction that literally shapes the architecture of the brain.
Serve and return begins when a child looks at something or observes something, makes an utterance, and that represents the serve. And the return is when the parent notices the child doing these things and responds to the child.
Under conditions where serve and return is broken, you literally are pulling away what is the essential ingredient of the development of human brain architecture.
It was a really compelling series of experiments where they started by videotaping the mother and the baby engaging in cooing and smiling. And then they asked the mother to basically put on a blank face and not respond at all. When a baby is not attended to, that is a sign of danger to the baby biologically. So the stress systems become activated.
In a brain that is constantly bathed in stress hormones, not that's up and down, that comes with normal development, certain key synapses, the connections between nerves, fail to form, and critical regions of the brain.
So neglect both fails to provide the stimulation that's needed to develop the basic architecture, and when it's at a certain level, is one of the most potent activators of the stress biology of a young child. So you get a double whammy.
Science points to 4 categories of this spectrum of neglect. The first category would be what's called occasional inattention, where children experience responsiveness most of the time, but occasionally adults don't respond. There's no harm in that, and in fact, there's probably some benefit.
A child can learn to self-soothe and explore the environment, and All of those opportunities build brain architecture.
The second category, scientists would call chronic understimulation, is where on a regular basis, children have less interaction with the adults around them than is needed for healthy development.
Those children typically, when provided with enriched learning opportunities and more typical levels of serve and return, will show catch-up.
The third category is what science would call severe neglect in a family where not only are there prolonged periods of inattention and lack of responsiveness, but often also associated with not being fed enough, not being bathed enough, not having basic needs met.
Neglect is a huge problem in the U.S. Children are much more likely to be neglected than they are to experience any other kind of maltreatment.
We see the child really being at risk for much more substantial kinds of deficits down the road that don't necessarily get easily fixed or ameliorated. This is where we really need to think about more complicated and often more intensive strategies to help undo those effects.
The fourth category, called severe neglect, generally found in institutional settings, is a result of children living in kind of warehoused type situation in orphanages.
And it doesn't have to even be as extreme as orphanages. It can be experiences that are regretfully occurring in many, many parts of our country.
Often institutional care in this country is under the euphemistic name of transitional care or temporary care or assessment facilities.
If you think about what institutional or residential care would look like for an infant, where there's somebody new coming onto the shift every 8 hours, it really alters the development of the child's brain architecture and other aspects of the child's development.
We have the potential to change children's developmental trajectories.
Interventions can apply to parents, to foster parents or adoptive parents, child care settings, Head Start settings, and other kinds of settings. And really, what they're about is attuning people to the serve and return process.
Neglecting young children is neglecting the foundations of a healthy next generation. The community pays a huge price later in terms of the problems of the next generation, whether it be educational achievement, economic productivity, good citizenship, the ability to parent the next generation. All of the things that have to do with a healthy, prosperous society.
So, as you can see, neglect is a major issue, and as said in the video, the leading form of abuse in the U.S. It doesn't leave bruises, but it harms in horrible ways. And I want you to be aware of that, not only because it's something we should be alert for the sake of intervention in other kids, but our awareness should also shape our caregiving, whether for our own children or for other kids that we give care for. Now, even in stable homes, can you think about what might actually lead to an unhealthy level of neglect that's happening and people don't even think about it? Screens. Ben's holding his phone up in the back. It's screens, and especially phones, tablets. It distracts us from our kids, or we use it as a babysitter, and it keeps their attention, but it doesn't have the serve and return, does it? There's no return. There's just constant giving of things. There's no two-way interaction. Our longing for two-way interaction actually is what makes and what is used by programmers and designers to make social media addictive. And make no mistake, it's made to be addictive. It's a science. You can go to school for it. Because it does do a degree of serve and return. You're always looking for a response, but that's not the same. And that's not what kids need to develop their brain architecture. And so we need to be careful about that. Christy was good about raising that as an issue, because I would help give the bottles to the twins, it was a good time to talk. But also, when I had a lot going on, I wanted to pull my phone out and check emails and do stuff like that. And she kind of had a rule that was expected we would follow. We broke it sometimes, but no phones while we're having those precious moments with the babies and able to interact with them face to face and giving them something they need and letting them feel that safety and security of attention while they're getting their food. But how easy is it to do something else in those moments? Because they're normally active and now they're quiet. But we miss out on opportunities to help them and to build security and stability, especially if you have children that are coming from a background that didn't provide that. How important that is to help them with that. So I wanted to show you that to build your awareness. And not just some of you are beyond your bearing years, but maybe you get grandchildren, maybe you help babysit. But I want you to go even beyond that now to think about it in terms of organizations that help care for children. That those truths shape how we go about being caregivers of kids. And so my third goal for today is I want to give an update on a ministry that our church has supported for well over 20 years, and that I got to know recently better. Got to know in a close way, serving on the board for the last 6 years. On Baptist Children's Home. We support them and read their prayer letters sometimes on Wednesday nights. We've given the projects for Vacation Bible School. Some of you can remember, if you were here at this church before even me, there was the director of BCH. His name was Jim Garrick. I don't know if some of you remember that. And he came once or twice while we were here, and we remember him. He gave us a ride in his private plane. He had just an old gas engine, probably a Lycoming motor plane, that when he was sharing about Baptist Children's Home, it was more efficient in several ways for him to fly where he was going. And he gave us all a ride. But we got to know BCH through that, and then through Bill Britton. And I got to know, through a variety of connections, got to know about it a little deeper. BCH was called into existence in 1955 by churches that were seeking assistance in caring for families and children. It started with churches in America that were trying to care for families and children that came from hard places, trying to provide biblical care for them. And so BCH was formed according to the biblical mandate in James 1:27 to care for the fatherless. And they answered that call. Today they're caring for more than 800 children in the United States, Dominican Republic, Haiti, India, Myanmar, Nepal, and Zambia. Now, I had met a guy, I think I'll tell you this real fast. I met a guy named Sinwa at Baptist Bible Seminary. I was taking modules there. And he was from Burma, from Myanmar. And he was taking a seminary degree. There was a godly man that was known pretty well in a lot of Baptist circles out in the Midwest. His name was Eldon Brock. And he would raise money to bring nationals from India, Myanmar, maybe some other countries, to come and get a seminary degree so that they could go back and work in seminaries in their home countries to raise up leaders, because Christianity was relatively young in a lot of those countries, and they didn't have existing seminaries and universities well-staffed with educated people to teach them. And I met Sinwa and got to know him. He visited here at our house one time in Elimsport, and I knew about him. And then Bill Britton came from Baptist Children's Home to give an update at the church, and he talked about how he was going to Myanmar shortly. And that I kind of got interested in that, and I told him about Sinwa, and he says, yes, one of our homes is associated with that Bible college where he teaches. And he says, I'll be going there in February. Do you want to go with me? I'm like, yeah, I didn't really see that as too viable, but we talked some, And eventually in 2017, I got to go to Myanmar. Ironically, because we had scheduled a big event with Bob Lenz at Montgomery High School, I did not want to miss that. I couldn't miss that. It worked out that I actually didn't get to go on the part of the trip that went to where Sinwha was, but I got to see several other children's homes in Myanmar in the process, and really fell in love with what they were doing over there. And when I came back, eventually in 2018, in January, I was invited to visit and sit in on a board meeting. Christy and I went out and did that. I was invited to be on the board and have served on it since then. Ironically, well, not really ironically, it was God's plan that 9-hour drive back with no children interrupt us, Christy and I got talking and shared with each other how God had been laying on our hearts to do foster care, both of us at the same time, and we hadn't ever vocalized that. I found out she had been feeling that tug for a while, and but it was like if you didn't talk about it, it wasn't real yet, right? But so that started that journey for us. Now, back in 2020, I gave kind of a full presentation about this children's home, and this would have been one of the slides I used. I found on my computer, and this slide talked about how Baptist Children's Home had group homes, orphanages, foster homes, adoptions, safe families for children, and international ministry. Well, a lot has changed in the last 7 years or 6 years. Even a lot has changed just from 2020 when I shared that, but it was already happening at that time. BCH has now has gone from calling itself Baptist Children's Home to BCH with this tagline, bringing children hope. And let me explain why the name change as I go through quickly and give a little bit of an update on that. Here is the current mission statement of BCH: to provide Christian care and counsel for family living. And these are the countries that we're doing it in, and we're getting ready to re-engage in Liberia. We had a problem with losing trust over a partner. Just because people are in another country doesn't mean everything is perfect there, and we ended up having to end our relationship with a partner in Liberia. A heartbreaking, difficult, extremely difficult situation, but now looking at re-engaging with another person over there, because it's such an impoverished country, and there's so many needs over there. And so some things are starting to fall into place for that again. But I want you to notice to provide Christian care and counsel for family living. In America and in India were where the bulk of our group homes were. I guess Myanmar was pretty close with that. But we had group homes where we sought to give a biblical family-like feel while caring for more children than are typically in a family, at least in this day and age. And so in America, there were group homes that had 8 and 10 children. In these other countries, like Myanmar and India, some of those group homes, and even Liberia, would be more like 20 in a group home in some cases. But we had a couple things starting to happen. In America, the group homes were underutilized. We didn't have as many children coming into care. Also, it was difficult to keep house parents. We'd get couples that would come, and they would just provide a family atmosphere, some of them having their own children. And a lot of times what would happen is you would get young couples who didn't have their own children, would have their children while serving as house parents, but that's hard work. And often they would end up deciding they needed to just be a family by themselves for a while. Or at the other end, you would have older couples, but after a while they would maybe get tired, or for a variety of reasons. It was hard to find couples to be house parents. And they were well vetted. They needed to be godly couples who were willing to do the hard work and had been provided with biblical counseling skills to help train the children. To be honest, before Christy and I talked about foster care, I was worried if God was going to call us to that, and I really didn't want to do that. That sounded too hard for me. But anyway, that kind of was happening in America. At the same time, one of the states we had group homes in, they passed a law, because the more institutional type group homes that you think of, there was a horrible situation of abuse, and I think even a death in one of those. They passed a law, no exceptions. You always have to have 24/7 awake staff if you're going to have what they call a group home. And our residential home settings qualified under law as a group home. We had a waiver to operate them more like a family, but that would be eliminated. So we had to close those. And they weren't being used as much. At the same time, India was cracking down on outside agencies. Compassion International had to withdraw from India. 8 of our group homes were forced to close, and more were at risk. And that's an awful thing when all of a sudden you're closed and there's been no chance to provide an exit plan for those children. A lot of them were sent back to relatives and stuff where they were already too impoverished to care for them. So that seemed like a lot of bad things happening, but really that isn't what it was all about. God was pushing BCH to make an important transition at the same time, and already internally there was philosophies changing. We talked about the importance of connection from the video above, right? Well, BCH did their best to present a family-type setting, but you can't really do that well for 20 kids and some of the bigger ones. But let me have you think about this. Even when we could do it perfectly, it's unlikely that a child would have the same house parents from the younger age, and we didn't take babies and toddlers. It was more like middle school children or older elementary children up through 18 years of age. What happens when you hit 18 years of age? You have to move out, and even if you've had a very stable setting, you have no family to really call your own. And in most of the cases, they saw house parents change a couple of times while they were there, restarting all over those connections. Now, a lot of the house parents, high-quality people, and in some cases, they would be able to stay in touch with some of the kids. Some of the kids initiated staying in touch when they grew out of. But it was still less than ideal. It was better than what the kids came from, but it was still less than God's ideal. And so we wanted to do better. Good is Christian homes, group homes modeling biblical family. Better is biblical families giving temporary care to children from hard places. Best is helping families learn to care and provide for their own children, to work through difficulties, or to adopt children into a permanent home that is stable and that gives a godly. And so that is the main focus now, especially in the U.S. We still have some group homes internationally, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But BCH has 3 basic ministries: Hearts of Compassion, Homes of Compassion, and BCH Cares. And so I want to first talk about Hearts of Compassion, and that is our international ministry. And but let me show you this interesting statistic. It's estimated that 5 to 8 million children worldwide are living in orphanages. So think about that. 5 to 8 million, that's a lot of kids living in orphanages. But not only that, 80% of children living in an orphanage actually have living parents, have at least one parent still alive. And what is happening is that there's a lot of families that they can't afford to care for their children. Or they may be scraping by in existence, but they can't give them any education or anything that'll help elevate them out of poverty. They'll just continue the same cycle that their families are in. And so a lot of families, maybe it's a single mom, maybe it's a grandma, but they hear about these homes that they can send their kids to, where they get fed and they get an education and they get clothed and they're cared for, and they say that's better than being with us in poverty, and they send their children there. And that is a true statistic across the board. That's a secular study. And Linda talked about, the CEO, Linda Brooks, she said, when I saw that, I thought, well, that's not true about us. And she started doing more research on a lot of the group home children that we have in Liberia and Myanmar, India, and found out it's just about right, that a lot of them have sent their kids there. Well, God said he places the solitary in families, not orphanages. And so the goal is to try to either help those families keep their kids, or to find a permanent home, or if necessary, we're trying to do more of a foster care model where kids are in a family and provided for at a more family level. So that's the goal. That's where BCH is headed. But we're still going to be running group homes for a while in some of these countries. That's a transition we want to make, but it will take time. And right now, there's great things happening in some of the group homes. This is baptisms at the Gem Farm in Myanmar. We have given money through VBS projects to this. We've had Pao Jin visit here at our church back in 2019, I think, talking about what God's doing at the Gem home, and then they were able to buy this farm, and that has been invaluable in the midst of the junta taking back over and the oppression that military government has brought to the people of Myanmar. They're conscripting anyone 18 and over and forcing them to serve in the military. But as a result, the Gem Home took in an extra 30 kids from the 20-some that they already had just because of what the war had been doing in that country. But they still try to have fun, to provide the kids a childlike, a normal childhood to some extent. And they were able to take an outing at the zoo one time. This was a picture from that. How do you take a family of 60 on an outing? Prayer, organization, and determination. The Gem family recently went to a zoo. Kids had never been there, none of them, not a single one. And they shared testimonies of marveling at God's creation. One of the things, there's challenges there. I remember when I was at that actual group home, the power would go up and down. Like they had an electric keyboard for church and a microphone, and the lights would dim and everything would stop working. And one of the boys would run out, and they had this like transformer that would try to do the best with the power that was coming in to make it work for what they had, and they'd play around. Well, now that building is bigger. They have more electrical demands, but the service hasn't improved. So they're raising money to get updated electricity there to be able to meet what is needed there. Here's another home in Myanmar, the Grace Home. And this home started out when I first started sharing prayer requests after the junta had taken over there. They were crowded into 2 apartments. They had taped over all the windows. It was right downtown, right in Yangon. They had a little hole, and they'd take turns kind of guarding the house, like looking out the window, watching, because soldiers were in the street, and there was all kinds of horrible things happening when they overthrew the democratic government there. And but by God's grace, they have been able to have. We were able to help them build a house out in the country to move all those kids in. They were very packed in, and like when somebody got sick, everybody got sick. And so now they have a little bit of space outdoors. They have a bigger house to live in, and so there's a lot of praising and rejoicing going on there. Also, there was a Bible course graduation recently from people from that home. By God's grace and through your prayers, according to our situation, on the 9th of March this year, we've done the graduation service at home. To God be the glory. This course starts by faith, only trusting in God alone, and done by faith and God's grace and through your support. Just an excerpt from a letter with a little bit of broken English there. There's also things happening in Zambia. This is Vincent there in the picture. He helps care for the children in our granny homes in Zambia. These are pictures from a special dinner provided by our annual Christmas campaign. The children each had gifts purchased personally for them, feasted on their favorite food and drinks. We currently care for 12 children in Zambia in 2 granny homes. They kind of start with a grandmother, whether she's by blood or just became a grandma figure in those kids' lives, and we help her give support and care for them in a family-type setting. And so that's 12 children, but they're split between 2 homes instead of packed into one building. Here's a new family that's just starting to be part of that in Zambia, the Sampai family. In the Dominican Republic and Haiti, that's one of the newest fields. They asked for us to get involved. Maybe you remember Pastor Predestin, that Dave and Lucas and the Cooks traveled and did work at Predestin's big orphanage there. He asked about partnering with BCH, but we said we would like to partner, but we don't want to do orphanages. And presented him to the idea of foster families where we can help provide food on an ongoing basis, but not just temporarily. A lot of the kids that would come in at Predestin's really only came for one meal a day, right, Dave? That it was filled to capacity, and then other kids would come and at least get a good meal and then go their way. We said what we would like to do is work with your church people to provide foster care where they actually live in a family full-time and get food. And so that's what's going on in Haiti and in the Dominican Republic. But please be praying for Haiti. You hear the news reports. And Predestin writes, there is total disorder and chaos. Please help us to pray because God is in control of everything. They're working to there's frequent kidnappings in Haiti now. They're working to try to get food in from Dominican Republic because things are in such disorder. So be praying for that. And these are some of the children that are in care there. And then coming soon is family-based care in Liberia. And this is Darius who will be helping us set that up and oversee that. And his mom had taught in a school that was part of BCH years earlier. And so he's native to there, but we have a connection and looking for great things to happen there, looking forward to what's going to take place. And what part of Hearts of Compassion now is a sponsor a child program where you can sponsor one or more children. We have some of those cards in the back. You choose a country. You can go online and do this, or there's some literature that has been on that back table for that. You can pick a country, then pick a child, and give monthly an amount you choose to help care for their children. We're not gonna tell you that, oh, if you stop giving this week, that child won't get any more food. But really what you're doing is you're helping to subsidize what's already being provided so that then we can give it to more children. And we will never just, drop a child because somebody stopped sponsoring them. But that will go a long way to help keep that ministry going and care for more children in need. So there's that. What's happening now, this is a VBS program or fundraiser that BCH has going this year to just provide recreational type things to kids. But then that other part is Homes of Compassion. And this is a ministry to families experiencing crisis. Through homes, church families volunteer to care for children in need on a temporary basis. When the crisis is resolved, the family reunites. The Homes of Compassion is BCH's very own ministry. We used to partner with a ministry called Safe Families, but now we're doing it ourselves. This is U.S.-based. It's happening in Indiana. There are churches, and there's been families that go through a process similar to what you would go through if you wanted to be foster parents, but it has nothing to do with the government, nothing to do with children and youth. There's no. It is strictly done by a power of attorney. We've had lawyers draw a power of attorney agreement. And so an example is a mom who is maybe they're in a tight spot. Maybe a mom all of a sudden had the person in her life, her husband or whoever, leave her alone with children and no way to provide for them. Or in some cases, it's a mom that has a new baby or a young child and all of a sudden needs a surgery or something like that. These are some of the crises that families might experience. And we have a legal agreement that a mom can sign and the children go into care with one of these families. I think there's currently 8 or 9 that are ready to do this. And they could get a call at any time and say, would you be willing to take a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old? Or mom maybe had an emergency hospitalization, And it's a short-term thing till that family gets back on their feet. And the plan is to keep it out of the legal system. And it's strictly done by a power of attorney. And maybe it's a mom that or a dad that says, I need to go into rehab for, 4 weeks. Could you care for my children until I'm back out? I want to get my life under control. And the truth is, if they change their mind the next day, they can come and take their children back. They still have absolute parental authority over them, but it's a power of an attorney to basically say, would you please care for my children until I ask for them back? And it has been used a lot. The program was planned, written, designed in 2021. To be honest with you, it took me a long time to figure out how does this work and wrap my head around it. They have a bunch of frequently asked questions that go into how it works, and you can go on the BCH website and look those up. I won't go through those for sake of time, but that is a really neat ministry that has been used a lot. These are some kids that have been part of that, and Craig is a treasurer at BCH. So he's a full-time bookkeeper, treasurer. He doesn't usually deal with kids. He has his own, but he's not involved in that day-to-day thing. He's in his office crunching numbers and that sort of thing. But here's a quick story. A mother of 3 and 1 on the way to work. Mother of 3 and 1 on the way, worked diligently to buy her own car for her family. Due to having complications with her pregnancy and having to work many hours, she had to place her children into homes of compassion's care. When she was driving to a church to receive support, she was pulled over by a police officer. They pulled her over because her plates were not up to date. What the mother did not know is that the dealership put a fake temporary plate on her car when she purchased it. They also discovered that she did not have a valid driver's license, but instead of placing her in handcuffs, she was transported to the church by the officer, and he only impounded her car. The mother called Courtney, caseworker for BCH, to report what had happened. Courtney informed me about the situation because she needed some guidance and support. I stated that since the mom was doing everything that she needed to do to get back on her feet and was communicating with us, we'd be willing to help in that way. The mother needed some major advice and assistance in resolving this situation, and it required teamwork from all the BCH staff. Dawn and Craig, two office people, Craig, the one I just mentioned, worked together to offer the mom some advice, drove her with her to go get her impounded car. They were able to have a great conversation with her on the way, realized that she was somebody who really wanted to get her life back in order. She knew the steps she needed to make and worked on them right away. She picked up an extra shift the previous night just to be able to pay the fee to get her car back. She was motivated. The car was released from impound, and Craig and Dawn drove the car back to her house with her. During that ride, they were able to ask her about her children and her little girl arriving soon. She had had 5 other pregnancies, but she talked about this one with excitement like it was her first. She talked about her 2 oldest children getting good grades. She was a proud mom, working hard towards correcting the mistakes she has made. And so Courtney is in continuous connection with the mom, working on helping her get a legitimate driver's license. Craig shared this quote: "As treasurer at BCH, I don't normally get to see the client side. However, on occasion, I get to do something like this, and I'm reminded about the impact our services can provide for those in need." I was happy to give her the help she needed to overcome a present obstacle. So just a picture of how that works. And then the last thing I'm not going to cover, we got to experience this as a church, but it's the trauma care. And we had that training, and the lady that came and did that, she shared a lot about the trauma ministry. I won't review that today, obviously, but that's what's going on with BCH as we try to apply biblical principles, give kids the thinking in the long term, how to help them, not just to put out immediate fires, but how to best prepare them to live and to break a cycle of poverty, to break a cycle of maybe unstable homes and abuse, and to lift them up. And this church has been a big part in helping that to happen for before we came here, so for over 2 decades. I want to just encourage you to be praying about it and think about that, but also may it shape your thoughts on mission that you live right here and right now with the kids around us. Let's close in prayer. Dear God, you've called us not to just support organizations like BCH, though that is an important ministry to support, or organizations like Dwell, the flyer in our bulletin this morning. But Lord, you also want us to be your hands and feet, your boots on the ground ourselves, where we're at. Help us to be alert to the opportunities to be involved in that way. In Jesus' name, amen.